I guess I should start, shouldn't I? So I'm really, really excited about this session. What I love about, and I talked about this a little bit towards the end of last week, is what I love about our Women in Platform sessions is that they're so diverse. So we take diversity to every level here. The first session that I hosted was around distribution, the future of distribution and distribution models. The second one I did was about young people leaning into financial advice. And this one, I'm talking about information security. So if I don't know if that's not a diverse range of topics, then I don't know what is. So I would like to introduce Sarah Self. Sarah is, I'm going to check my notes here because I don't want to get this wrong. Sarah is the UK and Shared Services Chief Information Security Officer at Aviva, which is quite a title. And I met Sarah probably a couple of months ago. We first had our meeting and it was just an intro because Aviva are one of my clients. I had to be really nice to her tonight. And just sort of like getting to know what she did, what she was doing in her part of the business. And it was fascinating, really, really fascinating. And for someone who faces into distribution and clients and sort of like many of you sit at the front end of the market, this is really, really relevant. And I think I touched on previously that typically information security and fraud and anything IT and cyber kind of like sits in the darkest back office in a room with machines are just humming. But really it's bursting out the back office and it's coming right into our lives front and center. I sort of like lent into the fact that our clients are aware. I think our clients are aware of data and data breaches and things like that, but they don't really know how to manage that. But I think it's absolutely our responsibility as providers and advisors to be acutely aware of this subject matter, which is why I thought it'd be a great opportunity. Once I met Sarah, I just got on the phone to Ted and said, oh my God, I found this fantastic person that I think she's going to be amazing at one of our sessions. And she's a woman. Fantastic. What I'm going to do for about the next 20 minutes or so is ask Sarah a few questions around her role, what it actually means, what it means to us, and some of the things she does, which I think is really, really interesting and relevant. And then if there's anything that kind of like trips your imagination or makes you want to comment or something, chuck it in the chat, because we can then ask Sarah those questions as and when they flow. So feel free to get involved for part two, but for part one, I will ask Sarah the first question. So I'll open up. So Sarah, thank you for being here. And first of all, can I just say, can you tell us, all of us, a little bit about your role? Tell us about you and your role at Aviva.
Perfect. So if I start a bit about me, so I'm Sarah. I'm also mum to two little girls who are getting slightly bigger now. They're 7 and 9, and also mummy to my fur baby, which is a Welsh Springer Spaniel. I have to mention today because my children have been going crazy all day because it's his 2nd birthday today. So working from home means obviously that you get to spend your day with my kids, and also my 3rd child, which is my dog, and my husband has to put up with them all as well. So my role at Aviva, I've been with Aviva for a number of years now, actually, and I've had the pleasure in specialising into cyber for quite a few of them now. So my original kind of background was actually in operational management and then transformational change. I then specialised into cybersecurity a number of years ago, and I first specialised in there through very much a transformational agenda. It's a very dynamic part of the world. Yeah, people use that language quite a lot. They say, oh, it's a dynamic environment. This genuinely is. It's a really exciting place to work. So I've thoroughly enjoyed kind of specialising into this area. And then it was end of the 3rd quarter last year that I changed roles and was given the opportunity to be the UK and Shared Services Chief Information Security Officer. And what that means is basically I work with the risk owners. So for me, that's primarily 3 of the CEOs of the different UK businesses within Aviva. I work with them for them to set their risk tolerance. So what are they comfortable with from a cyber perspective? Because we can never eliminate this risk. We're not in the business of trying to eliminate it. We can't do that. We're just in the business of trying to manage it into a box that you're comfortable with. And how do you, as the business leaders, define what that box looks like? And that's normally through, you know, you'll look at financial lenses, you'll look at customer impact lenses, you'll look at regulatory lenses, and you'll define what your box looks like. And then my job is to help you define that based on what is reasonable from a legal, regulatory, threat perspective. And I'll talk a bit about threat, I would imagine, in a little while, because that's quite interesting. Define what that box looks like, and then I work with you to either get you there if you're not there already, and if you are there already, keep you there. And we do that through people, process, technology. So we sort of touched on before, a lot of people think about cybersecurity as deeply techie, you know, deeply techie stuff, kind of the way I often, and it is a bit of a stereotype, but the way I often talk about it is, you know, people visualize probably a guy in a hood, or, you know, the anonymous kind of tag. That's a favorite of most people's. You know, they visualize a guy in a hood in a darkened room, there's loads of screens, there's loads of code running, and it is kind of, you know, it's deep dark depths techie. The reality of cybersecurity is actually there is elements of that, and it's fascinating, but there are also very strong people and process elements, and the way that you get your cybersecurity outcome is that culmination of technology, people and process, because pretty much everything starts with a person. They might be operating technology, it might be the person that lets them in, it might be the people that are running your controls, but pretty much everything starts with that. So my role is to utilize people, process, technology to basically get an organization or keep an organization in a place that they're comfortable with. And that isn't to say that nothing bad will ever happen. That isn't to say you will never have a cyber incident. It's actually to recognize the fact you probably will, but we will help you and work with you to manage that incident to the level that you are comfortable with, and make sure that you recover gracefully from it. You stop, you know, you stop enough stuff happening. When it does happen, you recover gracefully, and you manage that really well for your customers, for the regulators, for everything else around it. So it's a good job. I'm not going to pretend I don't like it. I do.
Brilliant, thank you. So I guess we are living in this COVID-19 world. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the risk to information security has changed in the current crisis?
So on cyber criminals, or threat actors as we might call them, are, if you take the criminality and the immorality and put it all on one side, so abandon the things that people like me get to look at on the dark web occasionally, abandon those things, put them all to one side, and focus on a lot of what these people often do. They are brilliant entrepreneurs. They are fast, they're effective, they're imaginative, they pivot really quickly, they're very agile in the way that they operate, and my God, are they commercially focused. So we sometimes talk a little bit about hacktivism, and what hacktivism is sort of your politically motivated, you know, we're doing this for the good of mankind, the good of humanity, it's, you know, us against the man, or whatever, you know, whatever they want to kind of see it as. That's very minimal in reality. The vast majority of cyber attack is financial. And it's a huge money-making scheme, and these guys are brilliant entrepreneurs. So the people that run kind of the scams, that run these attacks, are there to make a lot of money. So COVID to them has really been the best thing to pivot to in 2020. You know, it's been the only game in town for many different reasons, and so these criminals or entrepreneurs, depending on which lens you look a little bit, have pivoted to use it. So what we've seen is they've done that in a couple of different ways. So one is, I would say, almost like that straightforward pivot. So what they've done is they've said, right, people are more likely to be susceptible to scams or frauds if I COVID theme them. So actually, if I use that as my way in, if I use that as my trigger point, if I use that as the thing that somebody is going to open the door with, I am more likely to be successful. So they've pivoted to use that as their theme, if you like. What they've then done is they've said people have changed their modus operandi. So actually, the obvious one of those is we're all sitting at home, and we weren't all sitting at home. I've just noticed my iron in the background, my ironing board. That shouldn't be there. And oops. And but we've all pivoted from, we were working largely in offices. We're now not. So we've changed our ways of working. And what they've looked to do is to say, how can I exploit those differences? So have people introduced weaknesses or vulnerabilities because they've changed how they're working, where they're working, what technologies they're using? Can I utilize any of that? So those two things, they've kind of pivoted the theme, if you like, and then they've looked for areas to exploit that maybe weren't as open or as free as they were previously, because we've had to work in different ways. Now, the good thing on our side is that actually what we haven't seen people do, and then I will talk to some bad bits as well, but the good bit that we haven't seen is we haven't seen people dramatically create new things. So what we have seen is we've seen lots of things be themed COVID. We've seen lots of things go under that ruse. We haven't generally seen completely new ranges of malware or completely new attack methods, if you like. They're still using some of those same techniques. They've just changed the theme. And the holes that may or may not have been opened up by people operating differently, a lot of organisations, not all, but a lot of organisations have made quite good conscious choices through the changes that they've made, and they've put in place some reasonable compensatory activity around it. On the bad side, what we have seen is some really nasty targeting go on. So what if I talk from, say, an Aviva perspective, so talking in that theme bit, and then actually I'll talk a bit about the targeting. Phishing is massive. We all receive loads of scams, loads of phishing emails. It's really effective, actually. That's why we receive so many of them, because good ones are really effective. If we look at probably around the globe, probably a good 30 to 40% of the entire kind of phishing that's going on at the moment has a COVID theme to it. So just that volume and kind of ruse has gone, off the scale, COVID themed. What we have also seen is some really nasty targeting. So we have seen a number of hospitals and testing facilities being hit, primarily with malware, which is malicious software. So ransomware, where maybe we will lock your IT equipment, and unless you pay us money, then we won't open it up for you. Or you get a double whammy on those, where it says, I've stolen your data and I've locked it. So actually you pay me to unlock it and pay me again, and then I'll give you back your data. So we've seen some of those. We have seen testing facilities being hit with exactly that. We've seen hospitals be hit with exactly that. And what we have seen a huge increase in is the level of personal scam. So lots of fake charitable things. So lots of stuff around donate here and we will get PPE to wherever we're getting the PPE to, give us your money. Lots of fake scams like that. And we have seen quite a number of I would say more speculative attacks off the back of it as well. So a lot of people poking and probing to see, are there gaps that weren't there previously? Because fundamentally that it's commercially motivated, it's criminal, and there isn't a lot of morals involved in it. There were a couple of the major crime gangs that came out and said, we're not going to target hospitals, we're not going to target testing facilities. There were a couple that came out and said that and didn't. There was quite a few that did. And we do know of some areas which have paid some quite substantial ransoms. You should never pay a ransom. It's not, it's not legal. People do pay. And we do know that there have been some quite substantial, 7-figure sums paid out because of COVID ruses. So there's been a lot going on with it, I guess, is the short answer to where I gave you a lot of words there. The bit that I would just is remember, a lot of that is a pivot though. Remember, a lot of that was there already. They are just using kind of they're using the biggest game in town what's going to be most effective, and that's the one they'll use.
See, I
That's a lot of
told you
words.
I told you this stuff was fascinating, didn't I? It's like so interesting. Okay, so we talked about the entrepreneurial nature of these hackers and fraudsters, and the threats. Use the term the threat. Can you kind of like talk about that threat and kind of like, you know, the stages in which they move through,
Yeah.
like our computers, our organizations?
Yeah, so there's generally, and this is super simplified, but we often use something where we would call attack paths or kill chains. And this is in the way that most operational processes and things, if you take them up to a high enough level, it's kind of, it's the same process. They'll have complexity in them, but if you talk about, a make a payment kind of process, it's you can take it in a lot of organizations to a very similar structure. It's no different in cyber. If we take it up to that kind of, that top level sort of process structure, then those attack paths, those kill chains, tend to follow a really similar route through an organization. And an attack path that we quite like to use is something called the MITRE framework, which if you're ever that excited, you can look it up. It's the real one is like hundreds of steps. I would tend to talk to it in 5 steps, because this is generally a pretty good kind of view that an external hacker would take through your organization. And the first stage in that 5 things is they're just trying to get in. And so this is kind of the, how do I get through the perimeter of your organization? And once I'm through that perimeter of your organization, then actually what I want to do is I want to escalate my privilege. And what that means is, right, I'm in, brilliant. What I want to do when I'm in is I want to become as powerful as I can be. So if you're somebody with escalated privileges from IT, or you're somebody who is very senior in your organization, so might have access to particular payment systems, or even just the ability to influence other people who might have access to these systems. You get an email from the CEO telling you to very quickly do something, and you panic and you do it. Maybe if someone else has hacked their account, it's not actually them. So it's, I'm in, get me in through your perimeter, then actually make me be as powerful as I can be in your organization, so I can legitimately use your access for me to do whatever it is I want to do. I then want to move around. So we would call that kind of lateral movement. So I'm in, I've made myself a bit more powerful. I want to move about, laterally move around your organization. And that really is, I'm just trying to get where I want to get to, because I've come in wanting to get somewhere. I want to steal something. I want to get to something. There's a reason why I've come in. So I'm in, I've got myself more powerful. I'm moving around to try and find where I want to go. I'm then actively evading your defenses. So we would tend to say our good guys, if you like, are our detect and respond capabilities. And it's people, process, technology, but they are detect and respond. And what they're there to do is they're there to, exactly what it says on the tin, I'm there to detect something. Something wrong has happened. If I'm one of the people in the darkened room, one of my screens has gone ping. Something has triggered, something said, I've got something here I've really got to investigate. That's my detection technologies or people process. I then need to respond to that. So what am I going to do? And that could be things like, I'm going to burn assets. I'm going to stop you laterally moving. So I'm going to contain you. I'm going to burn assets. Whatever it is I'm going to do, I'm going to detect and respond. So this attacker is coming in. They've come in. They've gone, right, I'm now really clever. I'm now really, really, really important. I'm moving around. I'm evading these people that are trying to detect and respond to me. And then I'm doing action on objective, which is basically, I'm just trying to find the thing that I came in to get. So that could be access to your payment system to get money out. It could be a data store that I want. It could be that I want to impregnate something and leave it there in your organization. And then pretty much I'm just going to get the hell out. so it's I'm just moving through your organization in a way that says, how can I get where I want to go? And I try and do that in the way that you are least likely to catch me. what we have on the flip side of that is through those different stages is we've got a layering of controls, and this is what all organizations will have to greater or differing extents depending on the threat that they face, because there's no point if you've got very limited threat, there's no point in paying for nation state level security, because it's very, very expensive, and there's no point, there's no benefit to you, because you're not dealing with something that's real. If you are an organization who's on a reasonable level of attack, you need to have a reasonable level of defense to make sure that you're keeping that risk within the tolerance. So you have a mixture of controls, if you like, that go through that attack path, and they are your people, process, technology, things. And the reason why you have a mixture of them, and they're layered, so I would talk a lot about layers of control, is no one thing is infallible. Any one of those controls can always be breached at any time. Nothing is indestructible, nothing is perfect. And the reason why nothing is perfect is because, well, one, nothing ever is, and but two, more importantly, is because you are working with people or groups of people whose entire purpose is to get round what you're putting in. You know, so as fast as you're updating and you're working on saying, I make this really difficult for you, they're working on saying, right, I see what you've done there. This is how I would come around that. This is what I would do to get round or to get through that. So that layering and multiple and different ways of picking up becomes really important for us. It's a bit of a cat and mouse. And we do actually, because we love a good name, either we call it red teaming and blue teaming as well. And then we have purple teams as well. I know, it's very sad. We do have we have fabulous acronyms and fabulous names for things.
Cool, that's brilliant, and that's fascinating, really interesting to see the path that these hackers and the threats take through the organization, and then obviously what kind of mitigating things you take on board. So I was going to go to the next question around, so what can we do about it? But before I do that, I can see that Brian's come in with a question. Brian, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And to compare to what's going on over here, I wondered if you've benchmarked sophistication of cyber defense around the world, whether through Aviva or your clients. Over here, all the banks are using CyberArk. And Toshiba, I think, is sort of the #2 player around cyber defenses. So what do you think?
So CyberArk's really good. But CyberArk is, I talked to that layering of controls. CyberArk would count as one of your layers. So what CyberArk does, and it's really nice, I use it, it is really nice. What CyberArk does is it helps you with your privileged access management. It's a PAM tool, fundamentally. So if you think about that attack path, #2, I'm a privileged person. CyberArk makes it really difficult for that privileged person to be exploited. So it's a lovely tool. It's really good. We use it. It's really nice. But it's one part of your armory. What you will have already done is, if CyberArk is coming into kind of its forte, and people will use it every day, just logging onto systems, it's what you get your privileged people to use, because it adds an extra layer of problem getting into stuff, if you like. You've already come through perimeter defenses to reach that point, and it's not your detect and respond capability. It's one of those it's one of those tools in your armory. It's really effective. It's a really good one, but it's a privileged access management tool. It's probably one of the best on the marketplace for that type of thing. But when you talk to the whole of cybersecurity, that layering of controls, that's one of your bits of layers.
The language you use is very much like warfare, like armory, and so it is a war, right? It's a war.
Do you know what? It's I'm not ex-military, you can probably guess, but yes, it is. I work with a lot of ex-military people. We work very closely, or current military people actually. We work very closely with things like the NCSC or the NCA. You know, I have spent time with and it's one of the interesting bits of the job. I have spent time with the FBI and with some of the cybercrime agencies in the US as well. So we do, it is, and we do quite a lot of almost war gamification in it actually as well, because it is very much that kind of, you know, defenders and attackers. You know, it is that sort of, you are in that kind of gameplay, you know. So actually it's not, I used to shy away actually from using that language, and I guess I failed to do it, because I used to try and shy away from it, because one thing I'm very conscious of is I think we can put people off the industry actually, but it clearly seeps in very strongly. And there is a lot of, you know, it's not a real war, but you know, there is a lot of parallel in that kind of, you know, attackers, defenders, goodies and baddies. There is that.
By the way, CyberArk was founded by ex-Mossad.
You can possibly, I don't know if you can hear my children in the background.
That's all right. I was just going to say Mossad people founded CyberArk. I don't know if you were aware of that. So, Israeli Mossad.
I don't know what they're screaming at, but they're screaming.
Oh.
I can't hear them, if that helps. We can't hear them.
Yeah, I can't hear.
Maybe that's just a sharp mother's ear.
Anyway, thank you.
Cool.
That was very interesting.
Yeah, sorry. Did I lose you? I don't know if I lost you a little bit.
You're back. You're back. You said you could hear your children screaming.
Oh, good.
We couldn't hear them, so it was all good.
Yeah.
It was very smooth.
Good.
Don't worry about that.
Oh, good.
Keep your questions coming in. Before we go on to the next question, I've got a couple still in the bank. One's coming from Amanda. Amanda, would you like to ask your question now, please?
How many attacks are you defending each day on average?
So let me quantify the answer to that, and the reason why is it's quite important to think in severity. So happily and long, I touch some wood now and on the table, long may this last, is we defend against very few Sev 1 level big attacks, happily, very happily, and most organizations are in that range. We would probably have a number of Sev 2s a week, and then we would have a constant flow, if you like, of Sev 3 and Sev 4s. And what I would term a constant flow of kind of Sev 3 and Sev 4s are, that could be more sophisticated malware that gets through the perimeter control. So it's not, you know, we're relatively easily tackling it, but it's a bit more, but it's not, you know, our straightforward technology defenses don't just block it all and say, nah, you're never getting near us. It's sophisticated enough to come through some of those perimeter controls that we would need to do something with it. And then, you know, and as I said, a number of Sev 2s, you know, on one hand though, a number, not kind of, you know, reams and reams and reams. That will be different for different organizations. So as an insurer, again, slightly happily, our attack profile is slightly calmer than, say, a major bank would be. Their threat is higher than ours. Ours would be higher than, say, either a smaller insurer or some other financial services organizations. You know, so it does vary quite a lot. Happily as well, we would not, and again, long may this reign, we would generally not expect to be targeted by, say, a nation state type attack. That obviously that can change, but realistically we don't tend to see that. That sort of activity is generally reserved for kind of your nation state government, you know, governments and those agencies and defense agencies to each other. And as you go up the scale, maybe into some of your more military type activities, so your nuclear bases would obviously have a different level of threat and therefore a different level of protection than we would work with. So we're always doing something. You know, our defensive teams, our operational teams are always doing something. Happily, it's normally at the lower end of the scale, The other thing that we do get quite involved in, so I've been involved in 2 of these today, are when maybe third parties or suppliers or partners have an incident. And our work in that is, well, it's a couple of fold. Firstly, it's to make sure that we're not impacted. So are our customers in any sort of risk here? That's kind of your first question, is, are we at any sort of risk? Is our customers at any sort of risk? And then it is to understand any exposure that we've got, and then it's to learn. So one thing that the industry is really good at is we genuinely are quite collaborative as an industry, because we're sort of united against a common foe. so it's sort of easier to collaborate. But what we will do, if say we have a problem as an organisation, we work with other organisations, we will share what we call indicators of compromise. So we'll share what happened. So a company that we were working with today had a ransomware attack. They shared with us what happened. 1, so we can say, are we okay? And 2, so we can take their indicators of compromise and kind of update ourselves with it.
That's good to know, actually. Do you know that it's not competitive? Do you know what I mean? We're more secure than you are. And I think especially for a number of people who are more advisory on the call, or supporting with advice, they know that all institutions are trying to share best practice and support them and looking after their clients as well.
Yeah, and we do. You know, it's kind of, it's one of the things I like actually about the industry. It is good. I've seen I've Zoom now say, I can't not answer. Do you know what? I have not had a day in the last 4 months when someone has not asked me about Zoom. It is probably the favourite topic of conversation. So Zoom have come forward quite substantially over the last 90 days. Actually, at the end of June, their CEO completed their 90-day sprint, they called it, because 90 days prior to that, the Zoom CEO, and I've never known a CEO to do this, stood up and said, my platform's not secure. He was very honest. And he said, you know, the exponential growth that we were not expecting to happen, the growth of our platform has just been unbelievable. We're not really scaled. We know we've got some problems. And they held their hands up. And what they did was they said, we're going to take 90 days. We're diverting all of our development resource from any functionality development, and we're working on security. And we've worked with them, and I spoke to their CIO a few weeks ago actually, and they were tracking ahead of their plan, and they've done a good job. So the updates that they have sent out are good. So I personally don't sit here with any huge concerns now about the suitability of Zoom. I would say it's quite important to follow best practice on it. Use passwords, you know, make sure that you're kind of following those best practice guidelines with it. But I think some of the early issues that there were with Zoom, and there were security issues early doors with Zoom, we hadn't really seen anybody exploit it for financial gain. It was more being exploited for unpleasantness is the best way I can use to describe it. But it has improved. The thing I would say is it's been the Zoom kind of uprising. What's been most interesting is the impact that that's had on Microsoft. So everyone uses Zoom, and we can all understand why, because the functionality is so much nicer than just about everyone else's functionality. My God, and Microsoft shifting. their Teams functionality is stepping up. And actually what you've seen, I looked, because I'm boring, I look at these things. If you look at the usage stats for the last 3 weeks, Zoom has plateaued. Teams usage globally is going through the roof, and it's actually had a bigger exponential growth now than Zoom has had through this period of time. So whilst lots of people are personally and socially and organizationally using a lot of Zoom, Microsoft shifted, and their functionality's got better and better and better. And what you do get with Teams is you do get, for all of their foibles, you do get the Microsoft wrap, which isn't a bad wrap.
Cool, thank you, and thanks for that question, Paul. That's ace. Heather, you've got a couple of things popped up there. Do you want to go for your first question? Well, whichever question you want to.
Yeah. So my first question was something you mentioned in the intro, Sarah, and thank you. It's been really, really interesting. And we had a chat before with Rose, and hearing it again, I've learned so much more. But one of the things you mentioned was that one of the key considerations is how people manage the recovery. And I'd be interested in hearing from you, what does managing the recovery well look like?
Okay, so you'll probably all remember Maersk, one of the biggest cybersecurity incidents to ever hit anybody. You could argue that they managed their recovery really, really well. And considering they were an organization that within about 13 minutes, and 13 minutes, went from initial compromise to their company stopped functioning completely 100%. That was how long that cyber incident took for them to be gone. They managed their recovery really well in a number of ways, in the way that their communications were very, very strong. Their technical recovery, once they were able to get a server to recover from, was very good. So the reason why I use that example is that there's a number of nuances around kind of examples you can use around what does a good recovery look like. So I tend to use the term recovering. What you're ideally looking for is to recover gracefully. And what that means is, yes, I've had an incident. So I have to acknowledge I've had an incident. And that means I need to communicate honestly with regulatory bodies, with customers, with partners. I need to be honest in my communications and say I've had an incident. The first dreadful thing you can do, and we have seen this, is relatively recently, is organisations that have had quite big cyber incidents not being honest about it. That's the first no. So first, good recovery is actually to be honest and to say what's happened. The second thing is you need to be containing that incident. So there is always a huge forensic kind of afterwards, but have you contained well? So have you detected it pretty early? Have you contained it? So have you got control of that incident pretty quickly? So you might still have impact as an organization. You might still lose some data, or you might still have some stuff that's locked. But have you contained that? Have you stopped it spreading to other areas? So therefore you've contained that risk, you've stopped it being a problem for other people, and you've limited your own exposure. So have you shut it down? Have you stopped it, and have you contained it? And then it really is all about the strength of your recovery process in, have you got good data backups? Are you able to get yourself back to a position of pre-incident in the fastest possible way? Now, there's a lot of technical terms around that, where we would talk to, recovery time objectives and things like that. But basically, have you been able to get yourself back operational, almost, as if nothing happened, in a time which is acceptable and appropriate for your customers and for your business? So that that's a different, that's how long is a piece of string, depending on what your business model is and what the business is. But that communication bit is so critical. It is, a lot of it is won and lost in how well you communicate, because you can do a really good job actually around containing, around backups, around recovering, getting your business up and functioning. If you didn't tell the truth, or you weren't open, or you didn't communicate well, it can be a disaster. There was and I won't name it, but there was an organization not a million moons ago which was just dreadful, and you watched almost like the house of cards of kind of senior people fall, because the CEO kind of walked out and basically said, yeah, problem, I don't really know much about it, it's the CIO's fault. And then the CIO kind of walked out and went, oh, I don't know, it's that CISO's fault. And you just think, oh my goodness, you're the leaders here, you should have control of this, you should be owning that narrative, talking truthfully, and being in control, because actually the world has shifted quite fundamentally away from anyone believing, I think, that you can stop there being a cyber problem. We can't stop it. And so I very deliberately talk about, I'm risk managing, I'm not risk eliminating. So actually what we don't see is companies share, we see a company share price generally dip when they have a problem. If they recover well, and a lot of that is in those communications, it's generally a temporary dip these days. it's not a temporary dip if you don't recover well, or if you manage those communications really badly, then it can be much more of a permanent dip. That was quite a lot. It's quite an involved question that you asked there, but it's so hopefully that's useful. But it's a really interesting one actually, because it has quite noticeably shifted, I would say, in about the last 18 months. From, it used to be all about stop the bad thing happening, and then I think people realised how futile that was. It's not about stop the bad thing happening. You've got to be sensible, and if you're just letting it happen, then obviously you're negligent. But now there is an appreciation that says, with all the best will in the world, you can be doing a really good job and something bad can still happen. If you manage and handle that well, then actually you can come out of it stronger as an organisation. And we have seen that play through in certain organisations' reputation and share price. They might take a little dip, but then actually they come through really strongly. And Maersk would probably be one of the biggest examples of that. And some of their CISO and their CTO and their CIO earn a fortune on the after dinner speaking circuit these days as well. They can be quite hot property. They've done a lot of talking on that incident.
Cool, thank you. So I've got a question that's come in from Justine, which is very similar to one of the questions that I was going to ask. So Justine, would you like to fire in with your question, please?
Yeah, really, for the financial advisors, where would they go to get help on this sort of topic? I think when we're looking at press and press articles, the issue of cybersecurity doesn't come up unless that something bad has happened. And so what I'm trying to work out is trying to help them preempt that situation, or managing their risk, as you say. So where can they go to get that information to help them better risk manage their business?
So I would say there's a number of quite good sort of industry type websites. So actually the NCSC is quite good. So you can point them towards the NCSC, and the information which they've got on there is quite good. A number of organisations such as Aviva, actually we've started doing more of this as well, are trying to provide much more education and awareness for customers, for businesses, and that can be that can be really helpful actually, and then a lot of that will talk into what I would term security fundamentals. And it is about, you know, just not everybody needs to defend themselves at a crazy level or know crazy stuff. That really does depend on that threat. But actually, if everybody had a decent grasp of security fundamentals and what they are, and they did those things, then they would put themselves in a far stronger position. So as I said, so resources like NCSC can be pretty good. Insurance firms like ours do now, and will kind of, sometimes you have to buy it, but they will sell security products. And I don't mean like technology products, I mean kind of insurance type products, and with those can come a level of consultancy and advice. A lot of organisations, so the banks do this stronger than the insurance do now, but insurers are more doing this, is they will put stuff onto their websites and on areas like that around actually this, you know, here are good things to do, or good do's and don'ts, if you like. They will focus in on those security fundamentals. And what you mean by security fundamentals are, there's kind of, again, there's people, process, technology elements to them. But if you think about, people that are working with technology, think about fundamental things like patch management. And what that means is keep things up to date. So have a good up-to-date antivirus. When your endpoints say, I want an upgrade, do the upgrade. And that means, you know, for your endpoint, for all the other bits, for your organization, patch. You'd be amazed, you know, how powerful just having a regular and up-to-date patching schedule is. Make sure that if people have elevated access rights, they understand that they've got them and they know they're a privileged person, but then you take a bit of extra care around them. And then think about your emails. So be really conscious. So 90% of cyber attacks start from successful phishing. That's how I said, I think earlier on, how volume of phishing is because it's really effective. People click on links. People click on unsolicited links. People open attachments. Be so super conscious of those type of things, and those kind of, you know, they're sort of a number of things that I would term fundamentals. They're really, really effective, because what you're doing at that point is you're generally getting rid of all the dross. You know, you're generally getting rid of those kind of attacks which are just spraying at everybody and hoping that somebody falls them. You've taken yourself out of that area. You've said, do you know what, I haven't just left my perimeter open with a shed load of vulnerabilities that I haven't bothered patching, and I haven't clicked on a load of unsolicited links to allow things through those gateways. And by doing that, you take yourself immediately out of kind of the easy realm, if you like. And then you might not, you know, depending on the scale of organizations, you might not then be targeted at the higher levels of things.
Cool, thanks. So I'm mindful of time. We've got 8 minutes left and we've still got more questions.
I talk a lot, sorry.
So, no, it's good. So but I like the comment that Heather's saying that she's guilty of not doing her upgrades. So you've now been told by Sarah, do your upgrades as soon as they prompt you to do so. And there's some real practical tips that we can all use to make sure we're a bit safer.
Turn on auto upgrade on your phones.
Yeah. And I like the way that Elaine said, we're not allowed not to. So, certainly we get reminders all the time, like through your phone saying, do this, do this, do this. Yeah. And then if you don't do it, someone calls you. I mean, it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal. So where am I? I think I am gonna, what have I got here? So I've got, God, I can't even see my questions properly. Bear with me. I think I've got so many questions, they've scrolled down the thingy too quickly. So I've got a question here from Michelle around, and then I'm going to roll Gillian and Emma's question into one for the final question, if that's okay. Michelle, would you like to ask a question?
I'll be quick. So it sounds like you've got a fascinating role, Sarah, actually. It's really, really interesting listening to you. So I just wondered what your sort of scariest, hairiest, most exciting day was, because it sounds like you have quite a few of them, actually.
If you rewind a little bit, WannaCry was pretty frightening. If you remember WannaCry, that was pretty full on.
Can you give us a bit of a refresh on that? What was that?
So WannaCry was probably the first. Well, it wasn't actually the first, but it's the first one that we talk about, because it was the first one that had main impact. Not Petra was the first, but WannaCry was the first global kind of malware attack. And we would again, that war reference, it's weaponized malware. So up until that time, malware had been much more not one-on-one, but it wasn't weaponized in the same way as kind of Not Petra and WannaCry were. And what you saw with that was it just proliferated around the globe and impacted many organizations. So obviously we saw the NHS take quite a big hit in the UK around that, and that was never the intention. They were never a target, but it just proliferated. And that was full on, because that moved at speed. It also had huge focus and press coverage and kind of everything else going on around it, which heightens the pressure a little bit. It also heightens the volume of people asking you questions. So I know it sounds silly, but you know, if you're managing an incident, any incident, and actually you're suddenly getting hit by a higher level of kind of incoming of other things as well, that just makes it harder. So that one had kind of it had a global element to it. So your ability to contain was slightly tougher. You had a huge comms kind of angle around it because of the publicity. You know, it was front, you know, its biggest story going for a short period of time, and really the activity that we were taking was we did pretty well from WannaCry, but we had to take hard business choices to stop communications. We shut down borders almost, if you like, into our organisation. We disconnected countries from our UK network because we felt they were more vulnerable, and we said they can't come in. So we were doing a lot of what was preemptive, really. So preemptive containment. It never actually caused us a problem, but that's because we did a lot of containment, and we had customer and business impact from doing that. So whilst everyone understood the fact that we were in the middle of a major worldwide incident, they were kind of, we've still got customers, and actually you've stopped us now being able to deal with somebody over here. And so yeah, that was a pretty hairy few days. Sort of, you laugh about it now slightly manically.
Cool. I've got more questions coming in, but unfortunately I think I've only got time for one more. So as I said, I'm going to bundle up Gillian's question with Emma's. So Gillian's question was, to what extent has working from home heightened the risk of cyber attacks? And then Emma said, to Gillian's question, has the cyber attacks affected a crossover of personal work by working from home using the same computer?
So it is unfortunate. It depends answer. So it very much depends on the level of protection that you have got in place. You can work on a bring your own device, we would tend to say, perfectly safely. It can also be nightmarish, and it really does depend on how well prepared you are to work on your own devices, and kind of that risk level. All of the kind of security fundamentals apply. So depending on if it's a home device, if it's a work device, they need to have the right level of fundamental security associated with those things. The bit which has become, and if you've got all of those things in place, then actually the risk can be managed really no different at all. If those things aren't in place, then they would be examples of, I talked a bit about almost opportunistic attacks, that kind of exploiting new gaps that might have been opened up. If maybe you've made some rash decisions to use something which is unsecure, or you don't know it's unsecure, and you may have an unintended consequence that you've just opened something up without meaning to. The bit to fall back to is always those fundamentals. Are things patched and maintained? Do you know how it's connecting to an organizational network? Is it allowed to connect? If you've got the right setup in place, then actually being able to move it to a different location, actually not too challenging. The bit that it has done in a number of ways is actually it's been helpful. There have been a few controls that we've changed in Aviva, and we've actually said, you know what, we'll never roll those back, because actually we've probably just taken a step to better security because everyone's at home. Yes, and we'll never change that. So there are some upsides to it. A lot of it is about understanding and making conscious risk-based choices. I think the thing that and this is where we're at an advantage, because we're a big organisation and we approached it in a way of conscious thought and choices all the way through. So we make a conscious choice to do something or not to do something, and we understand the risk that we're taking or not. You're able to do that when you're in an organisation that's got a setup to do that. If you haven't got those things, then it's a lot harder. So it is a bit of an it depends answer. So it has opened up the opportunity for opportunistic attacks. It doesn't have to though, and there are lots of steps that you can take just by obeying those kind of fundamentals that keep you pretty safe. The other bit just to be really conscious of is just be very, very wary of things that are currently themed COVID, because there are a hell of a lot of scams out there. It's the #1 scam vehicle right now. Please be wary of symptom tracking apps. Don't like them. Sorry, there are a number of scam symptom tracking apps, so just be conscious of those type of things. And if you're thoughtful about it, and and you just kind of use good practice around some of those, then generally you get rid of it. I think I called it dross, but you get rid of a lot of that dross that unfortunately people do fall for.
Brilliant, thank you. So Sarah, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think that's been just so fascinating. I hope you all enjoyed it, because I mean, I've spoken to Sarah a number of times and I just keep getting more and more information, and it becomes more and more important about how we look after ourselves, how our companies look after ourselves, and how we can sort of like reaffirm and give confidence to our clients that we're in a good spot. So thank you for that education. It's always a good session when you don't get even halfway through your own prepared questions, because you get stuff coming in for people. So that tells me that you guys enjoyed it. So Sarah, thank you for giving up your time this evening to talk to us. Thank you, crew, for all of your participation and questions.